Good evening, everybody. It's your pal Martin Millett here. Hope you're going well. This thing I'm wearing, it's not really a beanie, but it's more of a, what do you call a snood. Like this. Yeah, it just goes around your neck. It's kind of like a scarf you can't lose because it goes over your neck. You see, regular scarves you have to wrap around your neck and you can fall off and lose it, but this is no way escaping unless you take it off. Yeah, and it also comes handy as a beanie. So, I wrote a post on my personal Facebook account the other day where I was showing a photograph of a guy crossing the border from Uzbekistan to Afghanistan. And the border crossing was quite amusing because it showed the flag of Uzbekistan as well as the current flag of Afghanistan, the black and white flag that the Taliban use since they overtook Kabul in August 2021. And it made me sit down and realize I have crossed many borders in my life. I've gone through tons of borders within Europe. I've crossed many Schengen and non-Schengen borders like the UK-France border countless times, Russia, Estonia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Slovakia, Croatia, Serbia, and, Albania, Greece, and Bulgaria, Turkey. Even though Bulgaria isn't part of Schengen, it's still part of the EU. I've crossed the border in most Southeast Asian countries, from Singapore all the way up to Myanmar and Laos. I never crossed into Vietnam overland. I've crossed the borders between Hong Kong and China and took the ferry across to Macau. I've crossed one border in Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. I've never crossed a border in the Middle East, unfortunately. On my trips to the Middle East, I've been flying in. Although I did cross the Turkey-Iran border 11 years ago. In Africa, the first border I ever crossed, well, the ferry between Spain and Morocco, it's not really a border crossing unless you were to go into the Spanish enclaves of Situa and the other one, and walk across, because that's a land border. The first proper African border I ever crossed, when I'm talking about land border, was my crap experience having to pay money to get into Senegal because these lying dumb shits who basically said I didn't have any authorization letter that didn't even exist. So yeah, because this is Senegal, that's the Gambia. So the only way out of Gambia without going through Senegal is if you get a ferry or a boat and go on to Guinea-Bissau. I crossed all but two of South Africa's borders. I didn't cross the South Africa-Botswana border because I entered Botswana through Namibia and left through Zambia. I crossed the Lesotho, Eswatini, and Namibia borders with South Africa, as well as having to deal with a corrupt policeman on the border of South Africa and Zimbabwe. No issues in Zimbabwe, just corruption in South Africa from dumbasses. And I crossed this really amazing quad point where Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, and Zimbabwe meet. So when I went from Kasane, Botswana to the Zambian border crossing, I got access to the Kaza visa, which allowed me entry into Zimbabwe, so I didn't have to pay them another $50. Now, I made a list of borders I really want to cross, hopefully in the next year or 10, depending on what I want to do with travel. Now, number one would have to be Jordan, Iraq. I've seen many people get on a bus from Amman and go all the way to Baghdad, or get into four-wheel drive and go from Amman to Baghdad within a day. It can be done. You just need to pay a couple of Jordanian dinars to get out of the country, and you have to pay about 77-ish American dollars to get into Iraq. Typical. Next one would be Lebanon, Syria. This is the only legit way into Syria right now. When I was in Lebanon many years ago, I was staying in Bishari, a really beautiful mountain village, a bit north of the country. I said to the Swedish woman, I wish I was going to Damascus right now. And she was doubting the safety of Damascus because of the war. And I said, well, if you just go to Damascus, you'll be fine. I mean, I need to go on a tour to get into Syria, so it's going to happen someday down the track. I mean, I've already got like a box from Damascus that a friend sent to me, which is like a mosaic and it's got the map of Syria. The next one, what I'd like to cross would be between Egypt and Sudan. Now, for many years, there was no proper land border crossing between the two nations. You used to have to get on a ferry in Aswan, and it would take you all the way to Wadi Halfa. Michael Palin did it when he went from pole to pole, and Joanna Lumley did it as well. Unfortunately, this ferry has now been discontinued because a land border crossing was opened many years ago. So basically, on this ferry, right, when it existed, you would get good views of this part of Egypt where like all the Egyptian gods and tombs, like Abu Simbel. Like imagine, leaving Aswan, waking up the next way on your way to Sudan, and you sail past Abu Simbel. You can go from Aswan to Abu Simbel by car, forward drive, and then you can go on from Abu Simbel to the border of Sudan. I've always had an interest in wanting to visit both countries because the funny thing is, Sudan has more pyramids than Egypt, but Sudan gets less visitors than Egypt, which is a sad reality. Now, the next border crossing is a bit weird. I'm going to talk about it's the Morocco-Mauritania border. It's pretty much a frozen conflict of a border crossing. You see, when you stamp out of Morocco, the 5 kilometers of land that you're traveling through towards the Mauritania border post, that is actually controlled by the Polisario Front. The Moroccan army have never ever been able to retake that. So literally, you're traveling through disputed territory. And basically, if you're traveling in the southern part of Morocco, make sure you just call it Moroccan Sahara because that's what the people say it was. If you say anything else, you're really going to irritate people. So just, and also don't talk about that old conflict because it's a really hard thing. Yes. So next up would be the border of Sierra Leone and Liberia. I don't know why I wrote this down, but I thought these two countries have had plenty of recent horrible times in the last 30 years with wars. But prior to that, Sierra Leone was a British colony, and Liberia was basically a project the Americans started to repatriate all the freed slaves. And the British did the same thing, like a lot of slaves who fought for the British in the War of Independence actually got a free ticket back to Freetown. So Freetown, Sierra Leone, and Monrovia, Liberia, two countries I really want to get to. A funny, interesting thing is that in the last month or so, there's now a ferry you can take from Freetown, Sierra Leone to Conakry. I am going to try to get that ferry if I ever get to Sierra Leone because Guinea, Conakry, another country I really want to visit. The next border crossing is of the island of Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, Haiti. It takes about 8 hours a drive from the capital of Dominican Republic, Santo Domingo, all the way to either Cap Haitien or Port-au-Prince. These days, you don't really want to go to the capital of Haiti because it's quite dangerous, but there are a lot of touristic stuff in Cape Haitian, such as the citadel and the ruins of the palace that the Emperor of Haiti lived in before he committed suicide. But it's quite an interesting border crossing because you see the complete difference between two different countries, especially when you look down at the border that divides the two. The next one on my list, it's not really a border crossing. Well, it is, but it's more like a tri-point. It's like Iguazu Falls, where Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay meet. You've got like Iguazu Falls that are on both Argentina and Brazil side of the border, and then you got a bridge over to Paraguay. The three countries in a day. I've been to Brazil, but haven't been to Argentina and Paraguay yet. And this is another funny tripod I want to talk about, is where Brazil, Colombia, and Peru meet. You can go on an Amazonian river cruise, cruising along the Amazon in one of these boats and lying on a hammock for days end. And then you reach the town of Leticia, which is part of Colombia, and then you got a little island that's owned by Peru, and then you got a land border with Brazil. Yet again, three countries in a day. It'd also be quite interesting to continue on the Amazon, go to a little town in Peru, which a lot of Moroccan Jews moved to back in the day. You know, they sailed from Morocco all the way into Brazil, travel on the Amazon, and set up shop in this little Peruvian town. Now, this is going to be a quite hard border to cross, but I do say it is plausible, it is possible. It's the Panama-Colombia border. Now, you can't really drive from Panama City to Bogota. No, you can't because of the Darien Gap. The Darien Gap is really dangerous. You don't want to cross that by land, but thousands of migrants seeking, freedom in North America do that every year. What you're gonna do is you're gonna go to this northern part of Colombia, and then there's a little part of the Panama border that you can actually walk across on a beach. To travel further into Panama, you'd either have to take a flight, or you would have to pay $500 to sail between Colombia and Panama. It can be done. Now, the second last one on my list is the Iran-Armenian border. Now, I have been to Iran as an Australian citizen, and Iran was the last country I ever visited as an Australian citizen before I started properly using my British passport. I can't travel to Iran as a British citizen independently, but I could do that if I was to travel to Armenia as an Australian citizen, leave my British passport with a friend of mine, and then cross the border between Iran and Armenia. I mean, okay, I'm born in Australia, I claim British nationality through my father, but I thought to myself, what about if I dedicate the rest of my life to the people of Armenia, and the Armenian government give me a passport? With that passport, I could go to Iran visa-free multiple times. Even though I am not of Armenian blood, I would be an Armenian citizen through naturalization. It's possible, anything is possible if you put your mind to it. Yes. And then the last border I really want to cross, even in this current time of age, is the Ghana-Burkina Faso border. On the Ghana side of the border is a crocodile farm where this guy can feed crocodiles chickens if you give him 5 Ghanaian cities. Burkina Faso has always been an interesting country I've always wanted to visit. Sadly, it's been plagued by threats of jihads, terrorism, and coups. But then I always take a page out of Thomas Sankara, one of my heroes, for what he did for the people, changing his country from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso. Then sadly, taken out by Blaise Compaoré, who sat on the throne for almost 30 years. And Blaise was also backed by the French. But I mean, it'd be nice to go to Ouagadougou and visit where Thomas Sankara is buried. And there's even a statue of him. Yeah, so anyway, these are the borders that I plan to cross in the future. The most memorable border I could say that I've crossed in my life would probably have to be Victoria Falls between Zambia and Zimbabwe, because I had a dream that I was in Zambia at the time when it was Rhodesia, like 1970s. And I just left behind Rhodesia, which was a really bad country of apartheid. And then when I crossed into Zambia, I found freedom. And finally, I had that dream. Another interesting border that I have crossed was the Sani Pass, going down those mountains from Lesotho back to South Africa. And also all the borders I took within Central America, then they're not really that exciting, but I do remember there was a bridge I drove across to go from Guatemala to El Salvador. I was driving at light, so it wasn't really that memorable, but at least I made the crossing. But sadly, El Salvador doesn't stamp passports. I just like register your passport details on the computer, and that's about it. Yeah. Um, I, I another funny border that may take up a few pages in your passport is if you drove from Kuching all the way to Kota Kinabalu in Borneo. Like you start off in the Kuching Sarawak part of Malaysia, takes you 15 hours to go to Miri, and then when you go from Miri to Brunei, you stamp in, but then the rest of the trip, you get so many different passport stamps. Like stamp out of Brunei, stamp back into Malaysia, stamp out of Malaysia, stamp back into Brunei, stamp out of Brunei, stamp back into Malaysia, Sarawak. And then because Sarawak has different immigration controls to West Malaysia and Sabah, you have to stamp out of Sarawak and then be stamped back into Sabah or West Malaysia. So anyway, this is a fun time of talking to you all about border crossings. Wish me luck. Hopefully I'll be crossing some of these borders in my future vlogs. Anyway, this is Martin the Metalhead, over and out.